exercise, we will be animating this simple intro logo of Sinigang. Again, before you start out with any animation, you start your design in Photoshop or Illustrator. So this is my Photoshop design. So again, I placed each element in different layers. For our title, I've also included the font in your Google Classroom. But it's still up to you if you want to change it, okay? So again, make sure everything is in separate layers. Then after that, make sure to save it as a PST file. Okay, so let's go back to After Effects and let's start from scratch. Let's go to File and then New and then click on New Project. Okay, next, let's import our Photoshop file. So let's go to File again and then Import and then click on File. Here, we have our Photoshop file. I've also uploaded this in your Google Classroom. Before you import it, make sure to set your import settings to Composition Retain Layer Sizes. Then click OK. So if you get asked again with this window, make sure it's still set to Composition Retain Layer Sizes. Then click OK. On your project window here, on your left, you can see all of your layers and then also your composition. If you double click this composition, we now have our layout in Adobe After Effects. Okay, first thing I would do is I will limit our duration to 5 seconds. So this is our 5-second mark. If you do not see this, you can use the plus and minus on your keyboard and then try to navigate on the 5-second mark. Or here on your upper left or your lower left, you can set this to, so let me zoom in. I'll set this to 5. So that's 5 seconds. If I press enter, I'll automatically go to the 5-second mark. Next thing we need to do is to trim our workspace area. So you can either click and drag it from the very end. You can hold shift to snap it. Or you can press the letter N on your keyboard as a shortcut so that the end of our workspace area will go to our time sliders position. Okay? After that, I'm going to trim this composition. So to do that, let's go to Composition and then let's go and click on the Trim Comp to Work area. So now my composition is just 5 seconds long. Okay, so let's start animating. Okay, so I'm going to animate first our spotlights over here. So I'm going to click on Spotlight 1 and then I can see over here that our anchor point is at the center. So if I open our attributes here in our transform, if I click and drag the rotation, our values will be coming from the anchor point position. So let's set this to 0. And then let's adjust this so that it would rotate here on the very end of our layer. Okay, so let's click on our anchor point tool here. The shortcut for this is Y on your keyboard. Then let's click and drag our anchor point from our composition window. Okay, now we've adjusted our anchor point. Let's see if our rotation is behaving properly. Okay, so now it behaves like a spotlight. So let's also apply these settings in our other spotlights from our composition. So I'm going to click on Spotlight 2. So this is our anchor point. I'm going to press Y as a shortcut to access the anchor point tool. And then I'm going to move this in our composition window at the very edge of our canvas. And then I'm going to check by clicking and dragging the rotate attributes from our layer. So here. Okay, so that looks good. Let's move on to our bottom spotlight. So I'm going to move this here. So again, click on your anchor point tool. Let's move this down. Then our other bottom spotlight, let's place it over here. Okay, so we have 4 spotlights in our intro title scene. Let's try to animate them one by one. Okay, so I'm going to click on the top spotlight and then I'm going to access its rotation values. I'm going to show you a shortcut so that you are able to work faster. If I zoom in here in our transform, we have anchor point, position, scale, rotation, and opacity. To access each and every one of these, you just need to remember the first letter of the attribute, except for the opacity. So for example, if you want to access the rotation, just press R on your keyboard while your layer is selected. Or if you want to access the scale, just press S. Same for the position, press P and A for the anchor point. And then if you want to access the opacity, just remember opacity, you have to press the letter T, not the letter O. Okay? So let's just minimize this and let's try to use those shortcuts. So I want to try accessing my rotation. So I'm going to press the letter R. Now I only see my rotation. Okay, here I'm going to set the first position maybe rotated this way. So I'm going to zoom in. Let's make it -40 so that it'll have a nice round number. And then I'm going to click on the stopwatch icon here. Now we have our first keyframe. Next, I'm going to move the time slider maybe to frame 20. And then here, I'm going to put this number in reverse. So that's going to be probably +40. So I'm just going to delete the minus and then keep the 40. So now our spotlight is rotating at the opposite direction. So if I click and drag this, we have our first animation. Okay, so most of you would start copying and pasting the keys as our spotlight animates throughout our whole 5-second animation. But I want to use these keyframes for our other spotlight and reverse them. So I will not copy all of the keyframes yet. Okay, so let's just use these 2 keyframes for starters. I'm going to go to my spotlight number 2 and then I'm going to press again to access the rotation, the letter R on my keyboard. And then after that, I will just select my keyframes from spotlight 1 and then go to edit, copy those keyframes, and then select spotlight 2, then again edit, paste to paste those keyframes. So now we have both keyframes working for spotlight 1 and spotlight 2. So how do you reverse the rotation for spotlight 2? It's very simple. Just rearrange the keyframes. So now I'm just moving these keyframes on the opposite direction. Now we have our spotlights swiveling opposite to each other. Now I can just copy and paste the keyframes all throughout my whole duration so that my spotlights would keep on swiveling for my whole scene. So let's copy this. I'm going to select everything and then go to edit, copy. I'm going to move maybe around here on 1 second and 10 frames. Going to edit, paste. Maybe let's move this over here. And then again, I'm going to select these 2 keyframes, copy it again. Move our time slider forward, paste it again. Maybe let's move this here. And then select our keyframes again. Go to edit, copy, and then edit, paste. Okay. And then maybe our last keyframe would be this one. Edit, copy, and then edit, paste. So now you can just adjust the timing of your spotlight. Make sure your keyframes for your second spotlight would match the position of your keyframes here at the spotlight 1. So next, I would just copy this, edit, copy, then edit, paste. So I'm just going to match the position of the keyframes over here. And then I'm going to select these 2 keyframes again, edit, copy, and paste. Then let's paste again. So I don't need to copy it anymore because my keyframes are still in the clipboard of Adobe After Effects. If you keep on copying and pasting keyframes, as long as you didn't click copy on something else, it's probably still in the clipboard. So let's click paste. And then last but not least, let's grab this keyframe, edit, copy, and then paste. All right, so Now we have our Spotlight 1 and Spotlight 2 animating. Now we can use these keyframes over here to also drive the animation of our bottom spotlights. So again, if I select both of my spotlight layers, and then I'll press the letter R on my keyboard to access the rotation attributes, you can see that we have our rotation attributes displayed over here. Now I can just select maybe a group of keyframes over here for our Spotlight 1, and then copy it. Then select either one of our bottom spotlight, so maybe this one, and then paste it in our rotation. So now we have the bottom spotlight here to the right already rotating and swiveling. So let's copy this keyframe at the bottom to our other bottom spotlight. So let's go to Edit, Copy, and then bottom spotlight 1, Edit, Paste. Okay, now our spotlights are animating in our scene. So one last detail is I will add a blending mode to our spotlights. So if you zoom in using your greater than and less than keys on your keyboard, you can see here our spotlight is semi-transparent. But we'll try to enhance it a bit further. So if you have been using Photoshop, you know about the blending modes. So you can find it over here in our timeline. If you do not see this, just right click on the bar at the top and then go to columns and then make sure modes is checked. Okay? So if you do not see it, just go to the top bar of our timeline, then right click your mouse over there, then go to columns and then modes. So let's select all of our spotlight and then let's set the blending mode maybe to screen or maybe to overlay. So it's up to you to add a little bit of, there you go. So maybe add is the best blending mode. So you can see as our spotlight swivels, it sort of like adds a little bit of brightness to our other elements so that it sort of like simulates what a spotlight does in real life. Okay, let's change the color to yellow and let's lock our spotlight. Next is we'll start to animate our popcorn. So here in the popcorn, I want to access the position values of our layer attributes. So to do that, I can press the letter P on my keyboard and then click on the position value over here. Then click our popcorn and drag it down. Then let's move our time slider forward, maybe around at the 3-second mark or 2 seconds and 20 frames. Then move our popcorn up. So we're done with our animation for our popcorn. Next, let's try to fiddle with the text animation. Okay, so for this module, I will also introduce you to the text presets of Adobe After Effects. Okay, so again, to be able to access the text or to make the text editable in After Effects, select the text layer from your Photoshop file over here. So this is our sinigang title. And then go to Layer and then Create and then Convert to Editable Text. If you're in an older version of Adobe After Effects, this option right here can be usually found outside here in the layer menu. So just look for Convert to Editable Text. Now we have access to our text layer over here. So you can change it to maybe online class or popcorn. So you can change the text if you want to. So maybe I'll just keep this at popcorn. Again, I'm using the font called Monotone. I will be also attaching this to your Google Classroom if you want to use it. But if you want to use another font style, you're welcome to do so. Okay, so what is Adobe After Effects text presets? So on your right, look for your effects and presets window over here. And then on your first option over here, you can see our animation presets. If you click this to open our options, we have different kinds of presets. One of which is text. So if you open this, you have all of these other options. And then again, if you open, for example, Animate In, we have different kinds of effects. Okay? So to apply these effects, you just need to select your layer, for example, this one, and then pick any of the effects over here. So for example, let's click on fade upwards or fly from bottom. Let's click and drag it to our sinigang layer. So now you can see we have keyframes, and then our popcorn has a fly from the bottom animation. So if you open our attributes here, you can see we have keyframes here in our text. Again, I'm going to show you another shortcut. To view the keyframes of a layer, just press the letter U on your keyboard, U for unicorn. And now you can see the keyframes of your animation. So here is our text preset keyframes. If you want to disable or delete this effect and maybe try something else, just make sure to go to your text layer and then look for your text attributes here, and then look for the animator attribute and then delete it. So I'm going to press delete, and now we are back to our original static layer. Okay, so one thing that would be difficult is choosing which preset that would be best for your intro title. So I've also attached a website wherein you can see a preview of all of these presets. So let's go to that website. So here, under blog.motionisland.com, you can see all of our animation text presets. For example, if you want to check out the animate in animations, here we can see each and every one that is listed here in our effects and presets window. Now, you sort of have an idea on which effect you would like to apply. Again, you can mix and match all of these effects together. But again, I would recommend just to use one or two text presets so that your text will still be readable to your audience. So for me, my favorite presets are in here in the scale folder. So I would use zoom forward. So as you can see, the text is zooming forward. What I usually do is reverse the keyframes so that the text animation will be settling down instead of zooming forward. So I'm gonna go to text, scale, and then zoom forward. So I'm gonna make sure also my time slider is at the very beginning, and then I'm gonna click and drag this to my text layer. So now if I select my text layer and press the letter U, my text is now zooming out. So all I need to do now is, so let me zoom in. I'm just going to reverse these keyframes for our layer. Now, instead of zooming out, our text is zooming in to our composition. Okay, so maybe for the featuring text and original series, I would also try to use different text presets. So it's basically up to you to mix and match what design you would like to do. Okay, but for demo purposes, let's try to just add a fade-in effect for our feature and original series. So I'm gonna select both of them and then go to Layer again, Create, Convert to Editable Text. One thing you can also animate in Adobe After Effects is when you apply an effect to a layer. What do I mean? So for example, let's select our featuring. And then I want to apply a fade-in effect and also a blur effect to our text. So for a fade-in effect, I will be using opacity. So I'm going to select it and press T on my keyboard to access the opacity. And then here, I'm going to set the opacity to 0. Then click on my stopwatch to add a keyframe. And then I will move my time slider forward and set the opacity to 100. One thing I would also do is add a blur effect. So to add an effect to a layer, you can either go to the effects menu right here, or if you know the code word for your effect, you can type it here in the effects and presets window. For example, I want to add blur. I can just type in blur, and then all of the blur effects are listed here in the effects and presets. This window right here is similar to this menu over here. So if you want to add the blur, you just go to effect, then go to blur and sharpen. Then let's select Gaussian blur. Here, as you can see in our effects controls window, we also have stopwatches. As long as we have stopwatches, it means that attribute is animatable. Okay? So if we try to adjust our blurriness values, you can see, if I zoom in, you can see we have our sort of blur effect for our text. Okay, so again, let's place our time slider at the very beginning. And then I'm gonna click on the stopwatch and then adjust our settings, maybe to have a blurriness of 19. And then once we move forward with our time slider, as you can see, our text is still blurred. Here, we can just set it to 0. So to see your keyframes for your blur and your opacity together, you can just press the letter U on your keyboard. So here we have our blurriness and our opacity keyframes. So now you can adjust this to have a more pleasing timing. So once you're done with that, you can also select these keyframes and then copy it to your other layer. So maybe we'll apply this to our original series text as well. So I'm going to go to Edit, copy this, and then go to Original Series, and then paste our keyframes there. So if I press the letter U again, I can see the keyframes in our original series, and then I will adjust the timing so that those words will appear later on. So you can also add a blur effect for your frames layer over here, but I will leave that up to you. Last thing we would do is to add a sort of zooming in effect for all of our scene. Okay, to do that, I'm going to introduce you to what we call the null layer. So it can be found here under Layer, New, and then Null. So a null object basically is an empty layer wherein you can just parent the attributes of your layer to this null object. What do I mean? So if I create a null object, you can see it's invisible, nothing is displayed. But if I open my attributes, you can still see that there are position values, scale, rotation, and opacity. So what do we do with this? So for example, I want all of our layers to be scaling forward or to be zooming in. If I access the scale value altogether and then scale this up, it will have an awkward animation for scaling all of our elements together. So what we need to do is parent all of our layers into our null object. If you look at over here, we have a spiral icon. This is called a pick whip. Okay, so the pick whip basically helps us parent layers to one another. So if we select all of our layers here and then click and drag the pick whip towards our null object. Now, if we try to access our null, specifically the scale value, you can see that all of the scale values of our other layers are driven by the scale value from our null object. So from here, I can just add a keyframe to our scale value from our null object. And then here, let's add another value like 110. So now we have a sort of zooming effect if we play this for our whole animation. Okay, so this concludes our video for our Module 2 exercise. Thank you for watching and I look forward in seeing you in the next video.